Il prossimo dei talk è nato in un modo che non mi aspettavo che sarebbe nata così. Nel senso che è letteralmente nato con me che scrivo che riempie una forma di contatto su un sito e gli dico: ragazzi, sarebbe fighissimo che veniste a fare un talk al WUD di Roma del 2016. Il sito in questione era gamestorming.com e loro hanno risposto, ci hanno mandato una mail indietro, ci hanno passato al general manager europeo, che è Dave King, che è qui, e noi siamo particolarmente legati a Gamestorming perché in qualche modo ha rappresentato un modo diverso di affrontare una serie di progetti che facciamo nella nostra attività professionale. E tra l'altro aggiungo che la società per cui lavora Dave King, che è XPLANE, è una società che fa facilitazione visiva, e avevo partecipato 4 anni fa ormai, a un workshop dei Frontiers of Interaction che era Visualizing in User Experience di Matthew Moraski, e lì c'erano alcune delle cose che poi ho ritrovato dentro Gamestorming. Un workshop che mi ha abbastanza aperto la testa in tutti i sensi, e da questo punto di vista siamo molto orgogliosi di avere Dave King qua, che ci parlerà di Activating Customer Experience in Organizations, e lo invito sul palco. Avevo promesso che facevo la presentazione in inglese, mi sono scordato, quindi adesso la rifarò. No, scusate, è per una questione dei video, sostanzialmente. So, we're pretty proud to have here this guy here, because the experience I had when I contacted those organizations was really impressive. Like, it literally was sending a contact form from a website, and they actually got me back and passed me through the general manager in Italy. And this website is gamestorming.com, and here we are with Dave King. We're pretty bound to the Gamestorming website and book, and you should buy it if you don't have one, because it really changed the way we interacted with the clients during projects, and really changed the way we started getting insight from them. And on the other hand, 4 years ago, I got into a workshop, visualizing in user experience, that really changed my mind of thinking of clients collaboration during projects. So we're pretty happy to have here Dave King, which I'm gonna introduce with activating customer experience inside organization. Thanks.
Thank you. Test. Am I live? Can you hear me okay? Yes, sounds like you can. Good.
So this is...
Yep. All right. There we are. Good morning, buongiorno. That's all the Italian I know, just about. So I'm sorry. I can say arrivederci at the end, so I've got both ends covered. Excited to talk to you today because I usually come after the work of a lot of the work that you do. I'll explain what I mean by that. For anyone who's a experienced designer or thinks about product and service design or any design on the outside of an organization, my company focuses on the inside of an organization and making sure that those good designs, that good design work you do, actually activates and sustains inside the company. And I'm curious, this sentiment, which I've said many times, how many of you have designed things for clients, beautiful, amazing applications, customer experiences, service design models, gave it to the client, gave it to the customer, or maybe you work inside a company and you did some work and you tried to get it to go, but when you did, it either did not go as designed or planned, or it kind of failed or died. How often does that happen? Is that okay, good, yeah, that's what I thought. It happens a lot. I've experienced it too, and it's very frustrating. And the good news is that doesn't have to be the case. There is a way to get good customer experiences, and I'm using customer experience as a very broad category here. Service design, again, applications, service models, it can be kind of anything. And actually, when I think about CX, I actually think in terms of this is a new strategy for the organization that they have to take into the company and make work for them. So let me jump ahead to that. So just very briefly, XPLANE is we're a design consultancy, but we focus on the inside of organizations. which is, we think, a little different than a lot of design consultancies. A lot of design consultancies are focused on customers, products, services outside. So that's why I say, when somebody designs a great service, we're often there picking it up and then making sure it activates, that it gets going inside the company, the organization gets aligned around it. Strategy activation, organizational performance is how we describe that. So from a customer experience point of view, it meets the organizational layers, and I'll describe what I mean by that. And there's a very simple diagram, but it's just to illustrate the point. There's a customer experience at the front, there's the front stage, the area in which they interact, and then the backstage of the organization. So customer experience often runs along touch points, and this is when a lot of people think about customer experience. This is where their mental model runs, right? To what are the touch points and interactions the customer has with the company, and that's fair. That's a great way to do that. And then there's that line of interaction where the company connects with them, and this could be in person across a counter, or it may be over a website or a phone call. There's all kinds of different ways. It may be through the mail, email, different ways that touch points happen. But when a new customer service model gets designed, a new customer experience, very often this is the layer of the organization that gets trained or oriented to deliver that, which is, again, good, that's fair, that's what it should be. But what's actually in the organization, there's a line of visibility, or call it a line of invisibility if you want to. Customers can't see beyond it, but there's a whole system happening behind that front line that has to be aligned to the new customer experience, or it won't support it, it won't help it, it won't thrive. And so you can see, even if there's a new design coming, there are opportunities for either improvement or points of breakage before it might even start. So what you want to do is have that full alignment from the deepest part of the organization out to the customer experience. And I'll tell you just a very short anecdote. We have a client in the United States called Lowe's, and Lowe's is, you can think of them as a Carrefour. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong too. But it's a big box store, and they had this idea of the customer experience of the future. And they did a lot of design work to get the people in the stores to provide that experience of the future. This great customer experience, very helpful, very knowledgeable. But as we went deeper into the organization to make sure the organization was aligned to deliver that customer experience, what we found was the supply chain was not. People who never talked to customers, never dealt with customers, honestly never thought about customers, it wasn't aligned to deliver that service. And when you talk to a supply chain, people in supply chain, they're very good at doing the same thing over and over again. They tune their engine, they tune the model so that they're running things very consistently, very profitably, very efficiently. And when you try to introduce change to them, they resist that significantly. They've solved for what they're working on. So they really don't care or think much about that end customer. So how do you get them to align to that? So that is the problem we're talking about, right? Organizations don't change, people change. You need to get them to change, the people at that end of the supply chain, to understand their role in delivering a great customer experience in the stores, online. So I have two goals for you today. I want to inspire you to think about organizational change not as a change management process, which is often thought about in that way. In fact, I would guess that for many of you in designing user experiences, customer experiences, it really is a matter of handing it to the organization and saying, good luck with this, go with this. You may not think about the organizational change. It may not even be in scope of conversation. But change management, changing an organization, can be a design process. This is actually the good news and what's exciting and fun about this. And that's my second goal, is to introduce you to a set of frameworks that let you design and activate change in an organization. So by the end of this conversation, you're going to have some new tools and an idea about how to use them. And you can hit our website. We write about these all the time and how to use them, how to implement them. So feel free. So the world of organizational change, and it has so many names, right? Some people call it change management. Some people call it transformation. It goes by a lot of different titles. But in the last 10, really in the last 5 years, it's gained a lot of momentum around the use of design thinking to help the inside of a company, not just the outside of a company. So this is kind of the comparison between the old school, the older ways of doing change inside a company versus the new school. And the old school was very top-down, very command and control, right? We're going to change management. We're going to drive stakeholder buy-in and adoption. We're going to cascade this. We've made a decision at the top of the organization, and we're going to push it down through the company and make sure they're all doing it. And we're going to fix what's broken, and we're going to make them do it until they're doing it. The new school, the approach that's more of a design approach, is a much more human approach, frankly. It's more about vision activation. We have this idea of the future, and in that model, it's more about stakeholder engagement through authentic participation and co-creation. And what I mean by that is, you might go to the head of an IT, or actually, let me use my example I was using before, the supply chain. Might go to the supply chain manager, and instead of saying, we're doing this, get aligned to this and make sure you're doing it, we're going to come back in a month and make sure you're doing it. In the new school of change, you might approach them and say, hey, this is the new vision. This is what we're solving for. This is what we're all trying to work towards. What would you do differently about how you work to support this, to help this grow? And in doing that, you engage them, again, authentically through a co-creation process, and you build on successes through doing that, rather than, again, trying to force people to do something. The difference between the old and the new is, in the old way, people become victims of a change. And in the new way, you make them soldiers in the change. You actually enlist them and bring them along in the change. So that's kind of a philosophical approach about that. In terms of the 3 frameworks, here they are, and I'll go through them in much more detail, but there's the change lever on one side, the 8 dimensions of an organization, and then the activation curve, as we call it. So the change lever it's an early conversation tool, and it can be useful for a team, it can be useful in conversation with a client. But you can look at it really in terms of just the actual physics of how a lever might work. You've got a current state that the organization is, and you've got a vision of the future state and what you want, where you want to be. And on the activation side, what is it going to take to actually lift from the current state to the future state? Now, the thing that's always different in all organizations is, well, how different the current state is to the future state. But at the bottom, where does the triangle sit under that lever? If it's all the way to, let's see, to your left, the organization is very adaptive and used to implementing change. These are the Nikes of the world, the Apples, the Facebooks, these companies that are very nimble and agile, and they can incorporate change very quickly. If it moves to the other sides toward entrenched, they're not good at doing change, or change is just difficult because of scale. Shell Oil is a huge organization, globally distributed. It's hard to get change to take place in an organization that size. So you can talk about where that sits underneath and how much force it's going to take to get from one to the other. The other thing about current state and future state is this is really what you want people to understand in the organization. What is this change we're talking about? What does good look like in the future that we're trying to achieve? And when they have that mental model, it becomes much easier to have the rest of the conversation. So the 2 other tools I'm going to talk about, so this is the 8 dimensions of an organization, and we use 8. There are models that use 3, there are models that use 15. You can adjust and design this however is appropriate for the challenge at hand. Going around, there's the structure of the organization, the talent in the organization, the systems and tools that they use, what are the cultural values at work in the company, the processes, the vision, mission, and strategy, which is often the thing that's changing, the knowledge and skills, and then up at the top left, the behaviors in the company. We use this as a diagnostic tool to understand when an organization is changing, what is its readiness for that change? So let me take it back to the original. If you're bringing in a new customer experience model and saying this is what we want the future to look like, you can go have workshops, design workshops with heads of departments, stakeholders, subject matter experts inside the company to say, where are we, here's the change, here's the future state we're trying to get to. Where are we ready and where are we not? And these are 2 actual mapping canvases from 2 different conversations with senior executives inside a company around a change that was going to be happening in their company. And anything in pink, in this case, is where they're not ready. And anything in green is where they are ready. So you can see they have a very critical view of themselves, but it's one of the nice things about this is it takes what is otherwise a very complex picture of, oh my gosh, everything has to change. We're not ready for this at all in so many different ways, and it organizes it into distinct sections, right? You get actually into distinct categories. The other thing that's very useful about this is you end up having consistent conversations with different people across, rather than just sitting down with them or running a workshop that just says, what needs to change, what's wrong, you get a consistent thread of feedback. And honestly, after about 4 or 5 of those conversations, you're going to start to see the patterns emerge. This is actually from a client engagement. It's a bank in Canada that was changing its whole customer service model. They were responding to the customers, the public hating banks after the economic crash of 2008. And so they were trying to become the friendly bank, go from kind of the older school bank to the new consumer bank. So they had a new vision coming in, and you can see into the middle, so you can imagine the star going in and the dot in the middle kind of bursting there. And anywhere there are more lines radiating out, there's going to be a bigger impact into those areas. So around knowledge and behaviors, there's a big impact into the underneath. Their processes had to change a lot. Their cultural values, there wasn't much impact to that. They had a good understanding. Their structure didn't need to change much, and their talent, systems, and tools, those needed to change a little bit, but not a lot. So this is an assessment of the whole organization, but you might run this assessment into different functions that are impacted by the change. HR, finance, sales, customer service, a call center. You can use this to look at different functions within the organization. Okay, so that's looking at, there we go. That's looking at the organization. That's a tool for diagnosing the readiness of the company itself. This is a tool around people, and we're going to talk about the people side of change now, because the 8 dimensions is more about the landscape, what needs to change organizationally. This is what needs to change from a people point of view. This is actually referred to, this is our own version of this, I should say. There's one that was developed, I think in the 80s by a consultant, and he called it the adoption curve. And we've kind of made it our own. So the way to look at this is, I actually think of it as the grieving process when you go through a change. First you hear about a change in the bottom, next you believe it, and eventually you live it. And this is what you're trying to get the organization to do, is move up this curve from, I've heard about the new customer experience and how that might impact my life. I believe that it's a good thing and I should support it, and now I'm actually living it. So the way to use this to achieve scale, right? Enterprise level scale of, the organization might be 200 people, it might be 1,000, it might be 100,000, right? And when you get up to 100,000 people, that's a lot of minds to change. That's a lot of hearts to change. So the steps to do this at a very high level are to segment the organization, right? Just like in a communications plan. Who are the target audiences that we need to speak to or we need to engage in this? And then map them onto the curve. We literally use the curve to plan, design, and measure the change of where people are. So segment the organization, map them onto the curve. What is the starting point today in relationship to the change? Have they heard about it? Are they already participating in the change? So maybe they're a little further up. And where do they need to be in the future? Where do we need them to end up? Most people need to go all the way up to live it. Not everybody. Some people just need to hear about it and support it and understand it. So once you have a sense of this, once you have the organization segmented, you can create a communications and engagement plan that will help move them up the curve. Because emails, presentations, town halls, these kind of activities don't move hearts and minds in the way that a lot of senior leadership hopes they will. The number of times we've heard a CEO say, I gave them the presentation on the new strategy, I did a town hall to answer questions about it, I don't know why they're not doing it. I don't know why the organization isn't participating in this. I don't know why we're not supporting the new customer experience that we spent a year and a half and €1 million to design. So what a comms and engagement plan might look like, and I know this is a little hard to read, but you can kind of see it. You don't need to read it, actually. A segmentation is on the left side, and if the 3 phases running out. There's awareness, training, and then the support as this goes live. And there are communication and engagement activities. There are presentations and animations and workshops and ambassador kits and websites. There are all the different things you might use to bring everybody along on the process and help them move up the activation curve. So another part of this is, how do you know what to say to those people, right? So I'm confident many of you have used empathy maps in product design or service design or other applications. We use them a lot in communication and engagement design as a way to really understand the target audience. And this is one of our favorites in terms of, there are lots of different models for it. This is one of our favorite models. We call it the big head, right? And so here we've got Jack. He's the head of sales, vice president of sales. So you might say, okay, in terms of the new customer experience model, what are the things Jack is hearing that about this? Well, he's hearing it's important. He's hearing that it's going to change the way we do things, that it's going to make sales easier. What's Jack thinking? Nah, that's not true. I've got a number to hit. Get out of my way. I'm trying to reach my commission. Leave me alone. So you can go around and just really understand sort of their point, and I'll use an example to illustrate this. So Bart Simpson, confident most people are familiar with Bart Simpson. If you ask somebody, and you can imagine Bart Simpson is the head of IT in an organization, right? Let's pretend he's the head of, actually let's pretend he's the head of supply chain. My experience with him is this, that he's disobedient, he's a rebel, he's obnoxious, I can't work with him very well, I really don't like him. But if I do an empathy map on Bart, and I say, well, what does he see? Well, Bart spends a lot of his time, he sees violent cartoons, he sees a lazy father, he sees a mother that's underappreciated, he sees a sister that gets all the praise that he doesn't, and that's what he hears. He hears mockery and bullying, and he's getting in trouble, he's getting judged, he's arguing a lot. So he's thinking, this isn't fair, I just want to have fun. My dad's a loser, maybe I'm a loser. So what does he feel? He's probably feeling unhappy. Right? He's lack of attention. He's feeling alone and hopeless and uninvolved. So now I have an idea, at least I understand what Bart's world is like. And if I'm going to engage and communicate with him to help move him up the ladder, I understand the starting point and how I might engage. This is, if you can use empathy for user-centered design, this is empathy for user-centered communication. Now I can start structuring messages, I can think about the interactions that are going to be needed, but if I think about trying to change his heart, his mind, if I send him emails and presentations and things like that, it's going to go nowhere. Clearly I need to engage with him at a personal level to try to move him up the activation curve. And that all feeds back into the communication and engagement plan. Just want to do a quick time check. Okay. So I wanted to show you just very quickly a very brief case study. This is a client, it's a bank in New York, it has 80,000 employees. And their customer service challenge is actually around data and data management, data governance, having accurate data. And it's right now, the current state is that it's inconsistent and unreliable. The people in the bank are protective of the information, and frankly, it's high-risk behavior. A bank's information, the numbers have to be right? Guessing of how many millions you have in this account or how many billions are in that account just won't work. So from an 8 dimensions point of view, the darker that it's shaded in is the more we're focused on it. This is, you would think of a data problem as more of an IT issue. Hey, we got to get the data tables right. This is an IT problem. This isn't our problem. But for them, that's true, and they're fixing that part of it. They're working on that part of it. But there's a human side of this. There's a human behavior point that these people have to be brought along. So it's behavior, it's knowledge skills, there's a bit of process, and as I said, there's culture and values in some systems and tools. So this starts with with design workshops, right? This is the data governance team, the data management team on the top that we're working with, modeling very early in the project. Who are we going to talk to? What's the current state? What's the future state we want? We're running through all of the things that we talked about earlier. And you can see some of the work there, some of the notes. So coming out of it, this becomes the communication and engagement plan, actually. And what we decided to do with this was segment the organization at a very high level. The 3 groups across the bottom are actually the segments of the organization. We could get much more detailed and granular. But we decided to stop at these levels. And then the arc across, and each little icon represents some communication or engagement with those teams. And you can see the creators and consumers, the middle group. The blue are the ones that need to be engaged with the most. They're the power users of the data, so we've got to get them on board with what we're doing. And this is kind of a collage of everything that we're doing with them. This is a 2-year program. We're about 2 years in now. It's going to go another probably a year or 2. There are visual maps, presentations, animations, design sprints, workshops. There's a change ambassador toolkit because you've got people in the organization going out and talking about the change. Playbooks, training materials, all kinds of, so anything you see there is a different tool to use to try to move the organization along. That's the talk. That's the full, that's all of it. So I'd actually love to take any questions that anybody has.
Thank you.
I think I got through that faster than I expected.
Thanks a lot for Dave. And if you have questions, the guy is here. If you are going to be in the workshop tomorrow, he's gonna more than happy to answer the question tomorrow also. And it's gonna be around, so don't be afraid, raise your hand and ask a question.
I just was wondering, what's the cue? What's the main reason for companies to come to you? Is this because they are humble, or is it because they are in crisis? Why do they come to you to ask you some help, or some improvements, or some revolution in their own businesses?
Can you, sorry, can you ask the first part of?
What's the trigger for the company to go to you and to ask you for some help? Is it because they are in crisis and they have no way out, or they need some external help like a consultancy, or? Yeah,
most of the time they've tried to activate it themselves and it's not working, or they're stuck in figuring out how to do it. XPLANE is a kind of an unusual company. The history of the company is that we would explain complex things to people. We created a lot of visual maps like you see here that would clarify complex information. And what we found over the years is that can be used inside companies to tell complex kind of matrix stories and information that it becomes really we talk about it creating clarity and alignment inside the company. So most of the time they're dealing with complexity that they just don't know how to solve. They don't know where to begin with it. And actually, so that's one. The other two times is usually after a strategy has been created, or in this case, in this context, a customer service design has been created. And in the case of the bank in Canada, they had spent a year designing this new, they worked with a different design consultancy to create the new customer service model. They brought it to them, and the bank said, this is great. Now what? Now what do we do? I have a 100-slide PowerPoint telling me what to do. Now how do I do it? How do I get the whole organization aligned and executing against this? And it usually comes down to three questions: what, why, and how kinds of things, right? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how am I supposed to contribute to it? But there's usually a plan, and then we get engaged to take it forward. Since I have a minute, I'm just going to show a couple more slides. Is that okay? If I have a minute. So one of the questions that often comes up is actually around culture. And what role does culture play in an activity like this? And this is the culture map. If you've ever seen this, it's making the rounds on the web. Our founder, Dave Gray, has been working with Alex Osterwalder of the Business Model Canvas fame in developing this. That's why it's got a strategizer bug on the bottom. And they've been developing it, I think, for about 2 years and kind of developing it in public. It's gone through a lot of beta versions. And it's simplified down to these 3 layers. And I'll describe what these layers are. But before I do, organizational culture, there's a couple things to say about it. The first is it behaves like a garden. And what I mean by that is if you leave a culture, if you were to grow a garden without any plans, if you just left your backyard or your side just to grow on its own, it's going to become that. It's just going to do whatever it wants to do. And a lot of organizations, that's actually what happens, right? The culture just develops organically from whatever's happening inside the company, the people, the influences. But it is possible to create a garden, have an idea of what you want it to be, and then frankly manage it, tend it, care for it, grow it in that certain way, plant the right things, give it the right amount of water, give it the right amount of light. And you can't control it exactly, but you can put it in a direction so that it ends up being what you want. And that's actually a big part of, so this is normally a build, but I put this into a PDF. So The behaviors, so here are the layers on the side. The behaviors are the things that you can see. These are the things these are the behaviors that we can see happen every day, the good and the bad and what's happening inside the organization. At the top are the outcomes, which are effectively what you harvest from your garden. What are you getting from those behaviors? What's actually happening? Or what are you actually seeing as a result? And at the bottom are the enablers and the blockers. And in a garden term, you can think about this, again, in terms of light and water and feeding the plants and that kind of thing. So the example that's up here is a sales team. And if you can imagine, and it's a very simple example just to illustrate the use of the canvas, the behaviors are on the sales team in the current state. So the current state is yellow, the blue is the desired future state. There's a lack of teamwork, they're fighting for accounts, they're protecting their accounts, and they're secretive. Those are the behaviors. And the results they're getting, the outcomes, are poor service and lost sales. They're getting reduced capacity, they're not hitting their growth targets, and they're hiding their best practices from each other. And if you go down to the enablers and blockers, well, why is that happening? It's a common story among sales teams. They have individual sales targets. They are rewarded individually. They're not incentivized to work as teams, so that's what's being cultivated out of the garden. So if you flip that over, instead, the behaviors we want are more team-based selling. We want them open and supported and sharing the accounts. The results we want to get out of that is we think we'll get more capacity. We'll get shared best practice. Our sales are going to go up. And what we need to change as an enabler and blocker in the culture is the team sales target. Move it from individual sales targets to team sales targets and team rewards. I just went through very fast what I know is there's a lot more to this and understand it. I just wanted to introduce this because culture is we often talk about strategy is the road that you go over. Culture is the landscape that you're driving over. It's the ground that you're driving on. And you're either driving on a paved highway or you're driving through sand. And culture is that differentiator. So culture can also be designed. If you Google the culture map, you will find all kinds of blog posts about what this is and how to use it in more detail. But I just wanted to introduce it because culture is one of those things that underlies. I'm getting the high sign. All set? What? 1 minute. I'm done. I'll give you the minute back. 1 minute. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.